So today, we are looking at a collision, a massive one. I mean, really, you have to imagine two giant tectonic plates just smashing into each other.
That's a good way to put it, actually. It's not a small thing.
Not at all. Because on one side, you have the absolute heavyweight champion of modern fantasy literature.
No question.
A guy who, and this is barely an exaggeration, publishes books faster than most people can read the dust jacket summaries.
Right. The man is a machine. He's a force of nature in the publishing world.
And then on the other side, you have the biggest tech company on the planet, a company that is, let's be honest, trying to buy its way into the cultural soul of America.
It's the kind of collision that generates headlines. It generates billions of dollars. And if you look closely enough, it kicks up a massive amount of ideological debris.
That's what we're here for, the debris. We're talking, of course, about Brandon Sanderson.
The Cosmere guy.
That
machine, as you said.
And we're talking about Apple TV. Specifically, the huge news that Sanderson has finally, after years and years of holding out, signed a major deal. A deal to adapt Mistborn and the Stormlight Archive.
Which, on the surface, is it's good news.
Yeah.
For fans, it's the victory lap.
Oh, absolutely.
The author makes good, he sells the rights, he gets the bag, champagne all around. Seems pretty straightforward.
But that is not the story we're telling today. Not even close.
No.
Because we aren't just looking at the press release from Apple. We've got a stack of documents here, and they're all centered on a commentary by a man named John Del Arroz, JDA for short.
Right.
And if you think this is just a standard congrats on the movie deal situation, JDA has a very, very different bridge he wants.
JDA he's a firebrand. That's probably the most charitable way to put it.
A firebrand.
He's an independent science fiction fantasy author himself, but he's also a very vocal cultural critic. And his take on this deal is, it's fascinating because it is so relentlessly negative.
So he's not happy about it.
He doesn't see this as a triumph for Sanderson at all. He sees it as a capitulation.
A surrender.
Worse, he sees it as betrayal. A complete and total betrayal of everything Sanderson originally stood for.
Wow. Betrayal is a strong word.
It is. And to understand why he uses that word, we have to peel back about, 15 years of history? We have to look at something he calls clout goblins, the woke agenda, gore porn, and even the legal intricacies of modern Hollywood contracts. It's a whole world.
Okay, that is a lot of buzzwords. A lot. Clout goblins is definitely one we're going to need to unpack very carefully later on.
Oh, we will.
But let's start with the basics, just to ground ourselves. Who is John Del Arroz? Why is he the lens we're choosing to use to look at this mess?
I think it's absolutely crucial to establish his profile because he represents a very specific segment of the fandom. A group that often goes unheard in the mainstream press.
That counter-narrative.
Exactly. So JDA is an independent author. He writes a series called The Adventures of Baron von Monley.
Baron von Monley. That sounds very aristocratic, very specific.
It's steampunk.
Okay.
Think airships, goggles, steam-powered technology, all that good stuff. But the key differentiator for JDA isn't really the aesthetic. It's the moral framework. He markets his work explicitly as clean fantasy.
Clean fantasy.
Or swashbuckling adventure.
So clean implies that the alternative, dirty?
In his view, yes, absolutely. He positions himself as a countercultural voice. Mm-hmm. He runs his own journalism site called Fandom. And his entire brand, his whole identity, is built on providing an alternative to what he sees as the degradation of modern storytelling.
What does he mean by degradation?
He believes that modern publishing, the big five, Hollywood, all of it, has become obsessed with darkness, nihilism, and especially with identity politics.
Okay.
So when he looks at Brandon Sanderson, he's not just looking at a competitor. He's looking at a former hero, a fallen idol.
Wait, a hero? He was a fan.
A super fan. A capital S super fan. And this is where the story gets really personal, and I think why the critique is so sharp.
Right.
JDA claims that back in the day, before Sanderson was the global icon he is now, they actually knew each other.
Knew each other how? Like, they waved at a convention once, or?
A bit more than that, according to the source material. JDA talks about playing Magic. The Gathering with Sanderson.
Okay, that's actually a pretty solid nerd bond right there.
It is.
You don't just play Magic with random people unless you're at, a tournament or something. That implies some level of connection.
Right. And he says he played cards with him a few times. They corresponded via email. He describes the early Sanderson as this incredibly nice, super approachable guy, just regular dude who loved fantasy.
So not the untouchable literary giant he is today.
Not at all. And he says he was deeply inspired by Sanderson's work ethic. Sanderson is famous for his output, for writing essentially nonstop. JDA saw that and said, That's what I want to be. That's the model for a successful writer.
So there's a mentorship dynamic there in JDA's, an unspoken one maybe.
Exactly. And you can see how that would amplify the sting of the critique, right? When JDA attacks Sanderson now, it's not coming from a place of, distant objective analysis. It's coming from a place of, I knew you, I looked up to you, and you changed.
It's the "you're not the man I married" speech, but for fantasy authors.
Pretty much, yeah.
So let's talk about that golden era then. If JDA thinks Sanderson changed so dramatically, what was he before? What was this version of Sanderson that JDA loved?
It was the clean Sanderson. And to understand why that was so important, you have to remember what the fantasy landscape looked like in the mid to late 2000s. Who was the king of the hill back then?
Yeah, that's easy. It had to be George R. R. Martin. A Song of Ice and Fire was
Precisely. And what is Martin known?
Well, moral ambiguity, complex politics, and a lot of weddings that don't end particularly well for the guests.
Right. And sex and violent. Lots and lots of it. JDA explicitly contrasts Sanderson against Martin. He uses some pretty intense language to describe Martin's work. He calls it incest, sex, and gore.
Wow. Okay, so tell us how you really feel.
He does not mince words, not at all. But his point is that in a market that was absolutely saturated with grim, dark fantasy, Sanderson felt like a beacon of light.
A breath.
Huge. Here's this author who is a practicing Mormon. His books, like the first Mistborn trilogy or his YA series Alcatraz, they were safe. You could read them with your kid. They had these incredible, intricate magic systems, epic stake, big battle, but they didn't have what JDA calls the filth.
I can see the appeal there. If you're a parent or maybe just someone who doesn't want to read about, torture and nihilism for 800 pages, Sanderson is a safe harbor, a reliable choice.
And JDA was all in. He talks about buying the leather-bound editions of the books, which, if you know anything about Sanderson's online store, are not cheap.
No, they're collector's items. We're talking hundreds and hundreds of dollars.
Exactly. So this isn't a casual fan. This was a true believer. He was invested both financially and emotionally.
Okay, so he's on board. He's a true believer. Where does the first crack in that foundation appear? When does this golden era end?
According to JDA, there is a very specific turning point, a patient zero moment for the infect framing. And it all centers on the podcast Writing.
I know that show. Of course. 15 minutes long because you're in a hurry and we're not that smart.
It's legendary for aspiring writers.
It is a huge institution, and JDA agrees, or at least he used to. He says in the beginning, it was pure craft, just the nuts and bolts of writing.
Like how to plot a scene, how to write good dialogue, world-building tips.
All of that. Pure mechanic. But then a new host joined a woman named Mary Robinette Kowal.
And I'm getting the distinct feeling that JDA was not a fan of this edition.
That would be the understatement. This is where we have to introduce a term that JDA uses. A very colorful term.
I'm ready.
He calls her, and people he sees as being like her, clout goblins. Okay. I'm going to need you to break that down for me. It sounds like a very specific piece of internet slang.
It is, and it's very deliberate. So let's dissect it. Clout obviously refers to social status, influence, fame.
Right.
Goblin, on the other hand, frames the subject as a creature that is, ugly, grasping, parasitic.
It's dehumanizing.
It's intentionally so.
Yeah.
The argument JDA is making here is that these activists, and he specifically identifies them as women in this particular context, they don't create anything of value themselves. Instead, they identify a successful, healthy host organism like a popular podcast or a thriving genre like fantasy, and they latch onto it.
They glom on, as he puts it.
That's his exact phrase, glom on.
So the accusation is that they aren't there to contribute to what's already there. They're there to co-opt it for their own purposes.
Exactly. He argues that their primary goal is to fundamentally change the culture of that space. To feminize it is a word he uses. To shift the focus away from merit and mechanics and onto identity politics, representation, and social justice.
And he thinks this one person, Mary Robinette Kowal, managed to derail the entire Brandon Sanderson train all by herself.
He views her as the catalyst, the one who opened the door. He claims that as soon as she joined Writing Excuses, the entire conversation on the show shifted. It went from how to write a good fight scene to feminism, representation, and BS.
BS is his
word. He says this change destroyed the podcast for him. But more importantly, and this is the key point, he thinks this is when Sanderson started listening to the wrong voices. This is the beginning of the end, the start of what JDA calls the descent to wokehood.
Descent to wokehood. That sounds like a heavy metal album title.
It really does.
But he actually maps this out, doesn't he? In his commentary, it's not just the vague feeling that things change. He sees very distinct stages in this.
He does. It's almost like he's laying out a clinical diagnosis of a disease progression. It's methodical in its own way.
Okay, walk me through it. Stage 1, what's the starting?
Stage 1 is the baseline, the golden era Sanderson, the Mormon author. The stance, as JDA saw it, was basically, I am a religious person. Please respect my religion. I'm not going to write about things that violate my conscience.
Which meant, practically speaking,
no gay characters, no sexual politics,
yeah,
just epic fantasy.
Yeah.
Magic systems, heroes, villains.
A stance that, while it might be controversial to some people, is at least consistent with his publicly stated background and faith.
Right. It's a coherent position. And JDA respected that. He saw it as a man of integrity, standing by his principles. But then comes stage 2.
The softening.
The softening. This is where JDA believes the external pressure from the industry, from the clout goblins, starts to work. The stance shifts to something like, well, okay, maybe gay marriage should be legal in the real world, but I'm still keeping it out of my book.
So he's trying to draw a line, separating the art from the politics. I'll vote how I vote or think how I think, but the cosmere is the cosmere, separate space.
Exactly. But JDA argues, and you see this argument a lot in these circles, that you can't hold that line for long in modern publishing, that the pressure is just too immense, which leads inevitably to stage 3, which says, I'm putting gay characters in.
And now we're impacting the text itself. The line has been crossed.
Yes, the Rubicon. The clean fantasy is no longer clean by JDA's specific, narrow definition. The barrier has been breached. And that, in his view, leads directly and inevitably to stage 4, which is where JDA claims we are today.
Okay, what's stage 4?
Activism, full-throated activism. It's no longer just about tolerance or inclusion in the books. It's about actively championing the cause.
What does that look like?
JDA points to the fact that Sanderson now actively financially supports LGBTQ charities. He says Sanderson is now out there fighting against what JDA refers to, sort of quoting Sanderson's perceived stance, as cisgender bigots.
So in JDA's narrative, Sanderson has gone from being this neutral, traditional storyteller to an active soldier in the culture war, and he's on the wrong side.
Yes, a complete 180-degree turn.
But why? That's the part I still don't get. Sanderson is already rich. He's already famous. I mean, he holds the record for the biggest Kickstarter campaign in history. He doesn't need anyone's. Why does JDA think he would compromise his core value?
JDA is deeply, deeply cynical about this. He doesn't believe for a second that this is a genuine moral awakening or a sincere change of heart.
Yeah.
He thinks it's about the one thing Sanderson didn't have, the one thing money and Kickstarter couldn't buy him: Hollywood.
The movie, the mainstream acceptance.
The red carpet treatment, that's the phrase Sanderson used, and JDA clings to it. He argues that the allure of mainstream celebrity, the deep-seated desire to be accepted by the coastal elites in Los Angeles, is so powerful that it corrupted Sanderson. He basically implies that Sanderson traded his religious values for a seat at the cool kids' table.
Which brings us right back to the deal itself. The apple. This is the culmination of that entire journey, of that whole chase.
It is. This is the finish line of the descent to wokehood. And the details of the deal itself are fascinating. Sanderson flew to Hollywood back in May. This was his first time seriously shopping the rights to the Cosmere 2016.
Why the long wait? 6-7 years is a long time to sit on a property that valuable.
Control. He's been very public about this. He refused to sell unless the terms were absolutely perfect. He didn't want his life's work to get turned into, a terrible adaptation like Aragon was back in the day.
A cautionary tale for all fantasy authors.
For sure. But this time, he says the terms were perfect. He wasn't meeting with junior executives or low-level development people. He was meeting with the top brass, the actual decision-maker. And the deal they hammered out covers Mistborn as a series of feature films.
Ambitious.
And the Stormlight Archive as a television series.
That is the absolute dream scenario, a massive movie franchise and a prestige, long-running TV drama, the two biggest formats.
But the headline, the thing Sanderson is shouting from the rooftops, the key selling point for his fan, is rarefied control.
Rarefied. It's a very choice. It sounds almost holy.
It is. It means he isn't just selling the rights and walking away to cash the check. He claims he will be the architect of the universe. He says he has approval rights. He's a producer. He's essentially claiming that nothing hits the screen, big or small, without his personal blessing.
Which, frankly, is almost unheard of. Usually, unless you're maybe J.K. Rowling, post-Potter, or Stephen King, the studio buys your book and tells you to get lost while they...
It is extremely rare. But JDA points out something really interesting here, a little piece of industry inside baseball. He connects it to another author, Christopher Paolini.
The Aragon guy. The one who had the bad adaptation he wants to avoid.
The very same. JDA notes that Paolini supposedly has the exact same entertainment lawyer as Sanders, and Paolini recently secured a very similar high-control deal for a new Disney Plus adaptation of Aragon.
So this might not just be about Sanderson being uniquely powerful. This might be a shift in the industry's legal standards for top-tier authors.
Exactly. Yeah. It suggests that these manga authors are realizing that they are the brand. They have the leverage now. They're starting to be able to bully the studios rather than the other way around. It's a power shift.
So if I'm a loyal Sanderson fan, I'm hearing all this and thinking, this is great. He has control. He can stop them from ruining it. He can make sure it stays faithful to the book. But JDA is not celebrating. Why not?
Because JDA asks the most important question. Who is the partner?
Apple.
And in JDA's world, in his framework, Apple is not just a tech company that makes phones. It is a cultural vehicle. He argues that Apple TV is arguably the wokest media outlet in existence today.
Woker than Netflix, woker than Disney. That's a bold claim.
That's his claim. And his logic for it's pretty interesting. He argues that Apple, as a company, fundamentally does not care about profit from its streaming service.
How does that make?
Their streaming service is a loss leader. It's a rounding error on their balance sheet compared to selling iPhones and MacBooks. The entire budget for Apple TV Plus is a tiny fraction of their annual revenue.
So they don't have the same commercial pressure to put butts in seats or get streaming numbers up that a company like Netflix.
Right. If a movie bombs, Tim Cook doesn't even blink. JDA argues that this financial freedom frees them up to prioritize the message over the market. He literally calls it a tax write-off that they use to influence the culture through glitzy, high-budget prestige TV.
And what is the message that they're pushing, according to JDA?
He points the finger straight at the CEO, Tim Cook. He claims Cook is personally pushing a specific LGBTQ cultural agenda through the platform's content. JDA says if you look at the slate of Apple's big sci-fi and fantasy shows, he mentions Foundation, Invasion, even the Godzilla show, Monarch. He sees a pattern.
Godzilla. How on earth do you make a giant lizard political?
JDA's quote is, the Godzilla show even ended up being gay. He argues that in every single one of these big-budget properties, the sci-fi elements, the aliens, the monsters, the spaceship, are just window dressing. The real payload, the thing they really want to deliver to the audience, is the gay plot.
So his fear is that Mistborn is going to get the same treat, that they'll add a gay plot, the story of Vin and Kelsey.
His fear is that Sanderson is complicit. This is the crucial twist in his art. JDA doesn't think Apple is going to have to force Sanderson to put LGBTQ themes into Mistborn against his will.
He thinks he'll do it himself.
He thinks Sanderson is going to do it gleefully.
Gleefully why?
Yeah, because he believes Sanderson is now so desperate to fit in with his new partners at Apple, so eager to prove that he's one of the good ones now, that he will self-censor. He will actively rewrite his own canon to make it fit the modern Hollywood mold.
That is a very dark interpretation of creative control.
It is.
The idea that control doesn't matter if the creator himself has already been converted, that the fox is already inside the hen house and you just handed him the keys.
It's the invasion of the body snatchers theory of creative control. The Brandon Sanderson who wrote Mistborn 15 years ago isn't the same guy who's signing the contract with Apple today. So giving the current guy control doesn't actually protect the old work.
And JDA has a very specific, very recent example of this kind of thing going wrong, doesn't he? A Ghost of Adaptation's Past.
Oh, yes. The Wheel of Time.
Oh, boy. The Amazon show. That was divisive, to say the least.
Divisive is being very polite. JDA calls it an unmitigated disaster. He says it went so freaking woke they forgot to tell the Robert Jordan.
And Sanderson was involved in that show, right? He finished the book series after Jordan passed away. He consulted on the show?
He was. And Sanderson has gone on the record, somewhat diplomatic, admitting the show had major problems. JDA claims that Sanderson basically said it sucked in private conversations or more guarded public comments. He knows it wasn't good.
So Sanderson saw the failure firsthand. He knows what a bad adaptation that prioritizes the wrong things like.
He does. And yet, JDA predicts he is walking into the exact same trap with Apple, completely blind. He thinks Sanderson is suffering from a massive case of cognitive dissonance. He sees the failure of Wheel of Time and thinks, this time it will be different because I'm in charge, not realizing that he's bringing the very same ideological baggage to the project that he thinks sank the other show.
This brings us to the stakes, because for most people, if a movie is bad, just a bad movie, you complain about it on Twitter for a day. But JDA uses language that feels much, much heavier than that. He talks about civilization.
This is where we get to the absolute core of his worldview. It's bigger than just one author or one movie. JDA believes that storytelling is the bedrock of culture, of civilization itself. And he has a catchphrase that he repeats, a kind of mantra. Identity is not
value. Okay, what does that actually mean?
He means that simply checking a box on a representation spreadsheet, we have a gay character, we have a trans character, this character is a person of color, is not a moral substitute for what he considers traditional virtues.
Such as
courage, sacrifice, honor, faith, the classic heroic trait. He argues that modern Hollywood has completely replaced a framework of value with a framework of identity.
So instead of a story about a hero who overcomes evil through righteous action and self-sacrifice, we get a story about a character whose main arc is discovering their sexual identity.
Exactly. And to JDA, that is fundamentally hollow. It's thin.
Yeah.
He argues that it doesn't sustain a civilization. He says that without real Christian values and family values at the core of our myth, the heroism feels empty. And he gets very, very graphic about his disdain for the alternative.
How graphic are we telling?
He explicitly calls the focus on gay relationships in modern fantasy grow. And he uses a phrase, and I'm quoting the source directly here. He describes these plot lines as being about putting a pee-pee into a butthole.
Wow. Okay. That is extremely reductive.
It's crude. It's designed to be shocking, but it serves a very specific rhetorical purpose for it. He's trying to strip away the love is love gloss that modern culture puts on it and reduce it to a mechanical act that he personally finds repulsive.
He's signaling to his audience.
He's signaling, this isn't brave, it's not progress, it's just perverted. And we shouldn't be afraid to say so.
It certainly draws a clear line in the sand. There's no middle ground there at all. You're either with him on that, or you're part of what he considers the gross problem.
And that's the real tragedy of this whole deep dive, isn't it? We're seeing a profound fracturing of a fan base in real time. On one side, you have millions of fans who are absolutely thrilled to see themselves and their identities represented in the Cosmere for the first time.
And they see it as the universe growing and becoming more welcome.
Yes. And then you have this other faction, led by vocal critics like JDA, who see that exact same representation not as growth, but as an existential threat to the genre that they love, a poison.
So, if the mainstream is dead to him, if Apple is a propaganda machine and Sanderson is a sellout, what's the solution? Does JDA just want us to give up and stop reading fantasy?
No, not at all. He wants you to pivot. This is the call to action part of his commentary. He is actively promoting an alternative ecosystem that he's helping to build.
Independent media.
Right. He wants you to stop giving your money to these big corporations. He wants you to read his journalism on Phantom Pulp. He wants you to buy his books, like The Adventures of Baron von Momlo. His pitch is actually very simple.
What is it?
I offer clean, action-packed, fast-paced fantasy that everyone in the family can enjoy without problem.
It's a direct promise to return to that golden era of Sanderson that's so much.
That's exactly what it is. He's saying the thing you used to love, they don't make it anymore, but I do. But he knows he can't compete with Apple's budget. He knows he can't spend $200 million on a TV show.
Or can he?
Or can he? This is the part of the outline that just blew my mind. The AI angle.
Yes, this is the most forward-looking part of his entire argument. JDA is incredibly bullish on artificial intelligence.
Which is so counterintuitive, right? Most artists, most writers absolutely hate AI. They see it as plagiarism, as theft. They see it as the machine that's coming to take their jobs away.
They see it as a threat.
JDA sees it as a weapon. He sees it as the great equalizer. He predicts the future, and he thinks it's not a distant one where independent authors like him won't need the Hollywood gatekeepers at all.
So instead of going through the whole song and dance of selling his rights to Apple and then praying they don't wokeify his story, he just makes the movie himself with an AI.
Ideally, yes. That's the vision. He imagines a world where he can feed his clean manuscript for Baron von Monlo into an AI program, and the AI spits out a blockbuster quality feature-length film.
With no producers, no studio notes, no cultural agenda being pushed on him.
Just the author's vision, pure and completely unfiltered. A one-to-one adaptation created at home.
But is that even realistic? I mean, we've all seen the AI video clips from Sora and other places. It's getting better at an astonishing rate, but it's still deep in the uncanny valley. And even if the tech gets perfect, what about the soul of it? Can an algorithm actually capture the nuance of a great human performance?
JDA doesn't seem to be concerned with that aspect of it. For him, the soul of the current Hollywood industry is already corrupt beyond saving. He'd rather have a slightly glitchy, uncanny AI-generated movie that adheres perfectly to his values.
In a beautifully polished, technically perfect Apple production that preaches against those values.
That's the trade-off he's willing.
It's a radical vision of the future of media. Every author becomes their own studio. Every creator has their own distribution.
If he's right, it would completely destroy the current power structure. All those clout goblins he talks about, they lose all their power because there's nothing left to gatekeep. If anyone can make a movie, you don't need to infiltrate the institutions anymore. You just ignore them and build your own.
It's the ultimate libertarian fantasy, really. Total creative and economic independence.
But you have to think about the downstream effects of that. It also implies a total bifurcation of culture, a complete split.
How so?
If this happens, we won't have water cooler moments anymore. We won't all be watching the same Game of Thrones or the same Mistborn adaptation and arguing about it. The woke crowd will watch their AI-generated content that reflects their worldview, and the anti-woke crowd will watch theirs.
Two completely separate cultural realities, never touching, never interacting.
That seems to be the trajectory. And this Brandon Sanderson deal with Apple in this larger context is just another way station on that road, a huge, significant one, but a stop along the way to that split.
So to bring it all back home, to synthesize this for the listener, we have a deal. Sanderson and Apple are...
And the mainstream narrative, the one you'll read in Variety and The Hollywood Reporter, says, this is a huge win. A great author gets the massive resources he deserves with the creative control he earned to make high-quality art for the mass. It's a success story.
And the counter-narrative from sources like JDA says, this is a trap. A compromised author sells his soul and his legacy to a corporate propaganda, finalizing a decade-long drift away from the core values that first. It's a story of a fall from grace.
And caught right in the middle, are the millions of readers, the people who just want a good story, who just want to see the characters they love come to life on screen.
JDA said, identity is not value. I think that's the phrase that's going to stick. As we watch these massive adaptations roll out, and not just Mistborn, but the new Harry Potter series on HBO, the next season of Lord of the Rings on Amazon, we have to ask ourselves, what are the values that are actually driving productions?
Yeah, maybe the bigger question is, can rarefied control, these ironclad legal contracts, these approval rights that authors are fighting so hard for, can that actually protect a story?
Yep.
Or does the very desire for that level of mainstream prestige, the desire to be on that red carpet, inevitably change the DNA of the thing you're trying to protect in the first place?
Can you walk on the red carpet without getting a little bit of red paint?
JDA is absolutely certain that the answer to that is...
Well, I guess we're all going to find out. The Mistborn movie is coming, eventually. And whether you're planning to watch it with excitement or with a deep sense of skepticism, at least now you know the battle lines that are being drawn behind.
Keep your eyes open. It's going to be a fascinating case.
Thanks for diving in with us. We'll see you in the next one.